don't think it would be remiss on my part to say that the issue of Zamco was not approved by Parliament.
It was not.
But members were...
The allocations were not done. Just like that $7 billion. Just to give you a background, we have had a conversation already with the Minister of Finance, where they accept that the 7.1, the 9 billion domestic debt was not approved. They accept that they've not come with a supplementary budget since 2014. So this is not your baby. It's there. But you as a technocrat, why are you contracting debt without complying with the law?
We act on instructions, Chairman. If treasury bills, if you are asked to issue treasury bills, just like the Debt Assumption Act of the Reserve Bank.
I'll ask honorable members with supplementary example, then we move quickly to another issue. Yes, Zamco Chief.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. It might be interest Governor for this committee to know what are the qualifications of those loans which are being sent to Zamco. Zimbabweans might be keen to know as well, because many individuals and companies are struggling to pay because of the prevailing economic environment. Their debts have not been moved to Zamco, but there are those sacred cows whose loans have been sent to Zamco. This committee would want to know what are the qualifications for one's loan to be sent to Zamco.
Thank you very much. I think before I answer the question, I need to highlight that the takeover of NPOs from Zamco, it's on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. Zamco buys NPOs from the banking sector when the banks are willing to sell to Zamco. Now the criteria, as you all may be aware, Zamco was formed to take over non-performing loans. So the criteria for takeover of non-performing loans is that the loan has to be classified as non-performing loans in terms of SI 200 of banking regulation. It has to be a non-performing loans either classified as either C, D, or E in terms of the classification of non-performing loans. That's number one. Number two, the bank has to be willing to sell the NPO to Zamco. You, as a borrower, you may want your account to come to Zamco, but if the bank is not willing to sell, then there's nothing that Zamco should do. So the first criteria is it has to be non-performing loans in terms of banking regulations. Two, your bank, where the account is held, they has to be willing to sell that NPO to Zamco, because not every bank is willing to sell the NPO. Others will opt to resolve them through their internal means.
Are you satisfied? He's not satisfied.
Yes.
For good reason. He's basically saying to you, we have ordinary people who are failing to get loans, but it appears that those who get these loans acquired are political elite.
Let me highlight that. On acquisition of NPOs, remember, Zamco was formed initially to help banking sector rid of the non-performing loans in their banking. So it's not Zamco who decides which NPOs would come to Zamco. Each bank has to decide. Because remember, this is an asset. So the owner of the asset is the one who's going to sell that asset. So it's not Zamco who decides which loans should. Because you may want, like I said, you may want your loan to come to Zamco. But if the bank is not willing, because remember, it's a willing buyer, willing seller basis. Because the disadvantage with us is that, unlike other countries where they got a loan, where they say banks can send all NPOs to an asset management, in Zimbabwe it's different. It's a willing buyer, willing seller basis. So that's why we've got no control over all the NPOs, because banks can say we don't want to sell. Like as we speak, there are some banks who do not actually sell to some who say no, we don't want to sell, we will resolve on their own. So in that situation, there's nothing that Zamco can do, because it's not a compulsion for banks to sell NPOs. It's a willing buyer, willing seller basis. And normally what happens is that if you look at in terms of selling, remember Zamco was formed to assist banks so that they don't close as a result of high exposure to NPO. Not all banks get high exposure to NPO, some with exposures below 5%. So in such a scenario, such bank may not be tempted to sell NPOs, especially because of the fact that the consideration is not actual cash, it's a TB over 26 years. So some banks, especially those that have got good management, credit risk management principles, may not be keen. So that's the reason why you find some people may have their NPOs not sent to Zamco. The banks would not want, and there's nothing that Zamco can do to say, can you take that NPO to Zamco? Yeah.
Any other questions? Can I ask just to be brief with the point?
Yeah.
So you submitted thesis. Just answer. The question that honorable members are asking is that, what is your criteria? The allegation that they're making to you is that you have got a subjective criteria, which is based on political muscle, and the list of the people who have benefited from Zamco are the political heavyweights of this country.
I don't think through the chair. I think what you must understand, like I indicated, that our criteria is very clear. The loan has to be a non-performing loan. That's the first criteria, because we were formed to deal with non-performing loans in terms of Section 57. Number two, the bank has to be willing to sell that NPO. Number three, in terms of pricing, the loan has to be secured by mortgage bond. That's the one that we use to price that NPO. So if the loan meets that criteria, we can take it off. If it doesn't, most of the things that most NPOs feel is that the banks may not be willing to sell that NPO. The NPO may have the security. It may be an NPO, but the banks may not be willing. So there's nothing that Zamco can do on that front.
Mr. Chairman, just to add,
Sorry, thank you. The purpose of Zamco is it to provide relief to the bank only, or relief to citizens who are facing hardships in the economic environment?
Mr. Chairman, in the simple terms, the purpose of Zamco is to provide relief both to the banks and to the individuals and the firms facing hardships. And this is exactly what I said when I was giving the context.
So the explanation is all time.
And it will be very important if there are any other, since this is a parliamentary committee, we are quite happy to hear those individuals and the firms that were rejected by Zamco on the basis of what the honorable member was asking.
The issue is not about what is happening in the future. The issue is about what is happening in the past.
Not in the past.
But I will allow some supplementary questions. Honorable Sansole, Chief Denny Ramatson. So can you give your questions Kawan, then Rakanai will pindra Kawan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of the loans acquired by Zamco, the collateral used for them is undeveloped land. Has the bank been, in all the cases, has it been able to establish that the title deeds to that land? Has it been able to register mortgage bonds in order to secure the recoverability of those loans?
Second,
thank you, Chair. Given the answers given earlier, is it possible to get a list of the companies or the people who got those loans? The beneficiaries of Zamco.
Yes.
Can we get that list?
So the honorable members are saying to dispel our contention that the purchase of loans has been subjective and has been given to the political who is who of Zimbabwe. Can we have the list?
Thank you, Chair. My question has to do with the reasons why we, in the first place, we have got non-performing loans. And some of the reasons have been high interest rates, the issue of foreign currency allocation or availability of foreign currency for some of the companies that deal with the raw materials that have to be imported. So what has the bank done to ensure that no punitive interest rates are charged on loans, and also the availability of those resources that require those companies to perform well in the future, or even to liquidate their loans.
Can I add one question?
Yeah, just hold on.
Yeah.
You've got another question. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want
Just hold on. I'll allow Honorable Mshoriwa. We are now winding down on Zamco. I'll now Honorable Mshoriwa.
Yeah, mine are two questions. The first issue is to do with the performance of those assets that were acquired by Zamco. Can you advise this committee whether there be any improvement in terms of redeeming some of the assets, and also to advise us how much interest are you charging those assets, bearing in mind that some of the assets that we acquired had actually breached the improvable evidence. The second part, which I also want to find out, is going back to your earlier question to say that it's a willing seller, willing buyer. And I want to understand from you or the governor, the Reserve Bank supervision role, a part of it is to make sure that in terms of non-performing assets in the banks, and I don't understand why would the RBZ through Zamco allow a situation where a bank would say, we cannot give you this non-performing asset, which non-performing assets are known by the RBZ, if Zamco was meant to alleviate both the bank and the customer. Because to me, to simply say we limit on the bank when the government had said that Zamco was meant to benefit both the bank and the customer.
Yes, so Comrade Kanai. Yes, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding the acquisition of willing buyer, willing seller. Can you confirm if you have some loans that you rejected as well? I mean, based on this principle, as you have said that the banks, they might be willing to sell and you might be willing to buy. If you ever rejected some loans that the bank wanted to sell to you, can you just confirm? Thank you.
Very quick, Kanai.
Okay, thank you very much.
Answer like a lawyer.
Okay, okay, I'll try to be a lawyer. The first question on the undeveloped lands, obviously for a loan to be taken, the collateral is we have to have a mortgage bond. So you can't register a mortgage bond if it's not, it doesn't have title deeds. So one of the requirements for undeveloped lands, they have to have title deeds. You only take those that have got title deeds, and then a mortgage bond is registered. A list of companies that have benefited from Zamco. Zamco, just like any other banking entities, is governed by the banker customer confidentiality. So I think that's that.
The bank. So customer bank privilege can't apply to Zamco.
Yeah, but you understand that the bank Zamco operates in terms of the Reserve Bank Act.
That's not a bank.
So that aspect.
Not a bank, and it's a private limited company owned by the central bank, but itself is not a bank. So customer-client privilege can't apply legally. Don't look at the government.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You respond to that. You respond to that. But what we want to highlight is that.
No, but you accept that Zamco is not a bank.
It's a financial entity. Operating in terms of it's not a bank.
Yes.
But
so
also
it's not a bank. You are not protected. You are not protected by banker customer privilege.
When Zamco takes over a non-performing loan from the banking sector, it steps into the shoes of the banks. Because remember, we are taking
customer. Let me answer you as a question of law. The customer loses his privilege of protection because he has abused the banker customer relationship by failing to pay. So he's getting an indulgence from taxpayers' money. So he can't hide under privacy. He agitates over the spirit.
I think that it might be that becomes a different issue altogether.
No, but we have powers of demanding that list as Parliament, and we're demanding that list. And they cannot, your debtors, non-performing debtors, defaulters, can't hide behind the legal principle of banker customer relationship because you are not a bank. They abuse their privilege by not paying their debts on time. So to that list here.
That's fine.
When are you going to give us?
No, we'll sit down and consider that.
No. We don't work like that. The powers.
Right.
So please give us that list within 2 weeks.
On the performance of asset acquired by Zamco, as you may be aware, these are non-performing loans, and the non-performing loans, they take time. That's why you find organizations like Zamco, they've got what we call a sunset period where they are expected to have resolved NPOs required. But I'm happy to say that since we started the resolution stage of the 1.1 billion NPOs that we required, we've so far fully resolved 250 million worth of NPOs, which means we are now left with about 882 million out of 1.13 billion, and we expect by the time that we finish our sunset period of 2025, we should resolve quite a number of NPOs.
The sunset period is when?
Yeah, 2025. Because our sunset period in tenure that was said is 10 years. Because we don't need to exist in perpetuity. Because if Zamco exists in perpetuity, you risk creating moral hazard in the banking sector. So we expect by 2025 we will resolve all the acquired NPOs and then moved on. In terms of interest that we are charging, our interest rates range between 6% and 10%. The cost of funds is 5%, because remember, we take over NPOs using treasury bills with a coupon of 5%. So whatever we charge is between 6% and 10%. So depending on the level of collateral and performance, that a borrower will be allocated the interest rate within that range. Then when said banks cannot sell NPOs to Zamco because of willing buyer, willing seller basis. What you must understand is that not all banks are settled with high non-performing loans. Because normally the international benchmark is 5%. Some banks have NPOs below 5%. So in such a scenario, some of those banks may not be willing to sell the NPOs to Zamco, given that, because remember we are not buying at book value, we discount based on the value of the security. So some banks may also not be willing because of the tenure of the TB that they are going to get, and also because of the discount, because it also means that they are going to carry out a loss if they are going to have that NPO sold to Zamco. So it's because of that reason that some banks then cannot sell to Zamco. In terms of rejections, yes, we have rejected some NPOs when they have been offered by banks. The major rejection would be on the part of the banks. Because normally when we price the NPOs, we price based on the security. So normally if the discount is very high, banks then may not want to sell to Zamco. So in that case, we have no option but to reject the acquisition of that NPO. We have had quite a number where we would say the discount here, because of the security is very low, we would say maybe it's maybe 40 cents in a dollar. The banks may not be willing to write off such a large income. So in that case, there is nothing that we do except to reject. Yes, we have had some that we have rejected because of that. I think that's
so on the list we want from you, you give us the name of your client, in other words, the person that you have purchased the loan. You give us the bank from which the loan was purchased. You give us the quantum. You give us the discount, 10%, 20%. You give us whether this debt was secured. So if it's secured, you say immovable property, stand 42 Udiro Township of Glenville. And then you give us the tenure of the treasury bills. My final question on Zamco to you, Governor. There are some who say that Zamco and the principle behind it is dangerous, because it encourages non-compliance in the system. There are some people who go and borrow, don't care to repay that money. They've got political muscle, and they know that their debt will just end up with the Zamco, and that's the end of it. And I think the Minister of Finance shares that view, because in paragraph 107 of the budget statement, his statement of the 22nd of November, he says in paragraph 107, in the same vein, government is freezing treasury bill issuances related to Zamco operations. With immediate effect, Zamco will no longer assume further loans from the market. In addition, government will review Zamco's mandate and consider winding up of its operations which are being supported by government. So in fact, the new dispensation wants to wind up Zamco, not the 20-25 years. What do you say to the people that say that Zamco is a toxic instrument, acquiring toxic debts, and should be wind up?
Thank you, Chairman. Three things, Chairman. Allow me, first of all, Chairman, to take you to page 12, just as an indication, which shows that Zamco, as far as you are concerned, Zamco has done very well for this economy. Without Zamco, Mr. Chairman, without Zamco, we should always ask ourselves, what could have happened to Zimbabwe's economy without Zamco? I will put to you, Chairman, and the members of Parliament and Senate, but without Zamco, this economy could have been collapsed. Why am I saying that?
Sort of you shared, including the current Minister of Finance.
I said my in the reserve bank position, which is shared by those who are willing to share that the like-minded group. If you look at page 12, page 12, you see at the end, I've just given you, we just given you a few companies, for example. If you look at Staffing, if you look at the Rio Zim, where would the gold that comes from Rio Zim or the diamonds that are being dented or Muturam diamonds, would those all been fired? If you look at all the Rengo mines, Kemon Motor, they are producing gold to the value of more than 250 kgs